All right, so let me introduce Michael Naylor. He is the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. He is a professional change coach and an Enneagram Institute faculty, or has been a part of the Enneagram Institute faculty. He is a licensed addiction therapist and clinical supervisor. He formerly is part of the International Enneagram Association as a professional member and teacher. He is the author of the book, The Alchemy of the Enneagram in Transforming Addiction. And with that, Michael, I'm going to read at the bottom of his email. This is what Michael says, and it kind of sums up his view of the world, I think. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
So, welcome. I'm Michael Naylor, and I am a Type 4 on the Enneagram Circle, and just want to say a little bit about myself. I came into recovery roughly 40-some years ago. It was kind of by accident. I did it because a particular guy wouldn't get off my back about going to a meeting, and I went to a meeting, and lo and behold, I identified with all of these alcoholics in the room, and I've been at it ever since then. And so along the way, I discovered what Bill Wilson talked about, is that, after you get sober, at some point, you may have to start dealing with what he calls underlying issues. And I would call them underlying personality patterns that I developed as a little boy to protect my heart from insult or shame or hurt or abandonment. And so, being a Type 4, I developed a kind of type structure to protect my heart that's four-ish. And each of the types has a kind of style that they develop naturally to protect themselves from hurt and suffering and insult to their soul. And of course, if you live on planet Earth, no one gets out of a childhood without certain kinds of insults or neglects, because there's no perfect parents on the planet. And so I started my journey, and about my, I would say about my 14th year, just realized I was really unhappy. And I'd worked steps 1,000 times, and I went to meetings and all that stuff. And I realized through, again, serendipity, that the program, AA, wasn't designed to work on my underlying issues. It was designed to prepare me for working on my underlying issues. And so at year 14, I had a therapist who became my teacher at one point. He said, read Enneagram Types by Don Riso. And look at the Type 4, and I read the Type 4, and I was horrified that somebody had written about my inner life and all the things that I felt shame or rebellion against or mystery about. And it turns out that Don Riso, who became my teacher and then my colleague, was a Type 4, and he just mapped out my soul without even knowing me, which I was just totally shocked by. But it got me on a journey of looking at what I would call my Enneagram patterns. And so, sometimes people wonder, like, why would I be interested in the Enneagram? And what I often say is that when we come into recovery, we have, some of us come in with less woundedness than others, but at a certain point, we start running up against the limitations of our own personal growth, which means that we have particular healing that may be available to us regarding our heart and how we've closed our heart down, or how we've developed habits of mind that are too encrusted and not open and spacious, or we've developed a body that's defended and can't feel our living experience in our body. But I believe that recovery is designed towards pushing us towards whatever our next limitation is, that inspires us to go deeper and to look closer at the core of who we are. And ultimately, it's in service of putting us in contact on a deeper level with our capacity to love, our capacity to receive love, our capacity to feel a real sense of well-being that isn't dependent on the opinions of others, our capacity hopefully to have an inner spiritual life where we have some kind of direct experience with spirit, with God, with Buddha, whatever the paradigm is that works for us. I find that they all lead to the same thing. And so a direct experience means that I really experience sort of the mystery of my own humanity and what I'm doing here. And with it comes often a sense of deep well-being and joy. So the Enneagram really is the study of becoming aware of what are the things that limit me habitually and stop me from having a spontaneous connection with my heart, or my ability to actually receive love when people care for me, or my capacity even to express it. So I'm looking at, what are the different defenses that as a little one I developed to protect myself, because nobody knew better. And then the job or the opportunity is to begin to slowly but surely unveil your heart so it's more available to your experience. And when I came into recovery years ago, as I look back, I feel like I had, like 40 different layers of protection that I developed as a little guy that then were supported. I drank to hopefully loosen up some part of them, and then they would close back down afterwards. And so through the course of my recovery, it's been a process of really unpeeling the onion, and we talk about that in recovery, just one layer at another. And the good news is all of this is learnable. And the bad news is just when you have unpeeled some new layer of defense and you're open and more joyful than ever, that lo and behold, there's another one waiting for you. And when the time is right, starts poking on you, going, oh, there's unfinished business here. So it's a process, in my experience, of growing and expanding, and then going in and doing inner work again, seeing where I have a new barrier to my own expression of my own humanity, opening that up through help and guidance, and then going back in. So it's kind of an opening and closing in a sense. It's like opening and then looking down deeper into my own soul. So I want to start with some slides here. We're going to do the journey of the type 4 and see if your diet is not only what you eat, it's what you watch. It's what you take in through impressions. It's what you listen to. It's what you read. It's the people you hang around with. Pay attention to what you feed your soul, not just your stomach. So in many ways, one of the things that I have learned is that I am only as healthy as the company I keep, which means I need to have people in my life who are ahead of me on the path, who have done inner work that I haven't done before, who can guide me. I need to have people in my life who are seeking the same kind of authenticity, truthfulness, and openness that I'm seeking, because through the support of others, I'm given the strength I need to step forward. So it's not a solo job. One of my favorite teachers, a man named Gurdjieff, said, doing spiritual work alone isn't difficult. It's impossible. So it's a team journey. So that said, I want to also look at this image, an image I use for recovery. We are like a crystal with many facets. And what occurs to me is when I was growing up as a little boy, these facets are, in a sense, are kind of windows on reality, windows on objective experience. And when I was growing up as a little kid, based on my own childhood, most of these were occluded, so that I couldn't really see out of them and experience the expression of that particular facet. So I've often said when I came into recovery, maybe I had 10% of these facets awake and open, and that was my access to communing with the world. And as I've done inner work, more of these facets have opened up, have gotten cleaned off. So maybe today I'm at around 45%. I've come a long way since I was just a little guy. But the point being this is that when we start looking at what the blockages are to these facets or these doorways to awareness, is that when we go through them, it's usually navigate it initially by going through another level of pain we haven't experienced before. So there's I think an important distinction to be made about this journey in terms of our own spiritual growth, is that we use the expression 4 steps forward, 3 steps back in recovery. But I think what is often not spoken to is that as you do deeper work, not only do you become more available to joy and the depth of love and the curiosity of a kid, is you also become more open to whatever has shut that down. And that's painful. So sometimes we forget to tell people that this journey will be one of opening and then experiencing another level of pain, and then opening and then experiencing another level of pain. And sometimes people will hit a point of pain in the recovery, and because they don't have any knowledge about the Enneagram or other transformational patterns, is they kind of bump up against the ceiling of recovery and get frustrated and then end up relapsing. So, one of the reasons I wrote the book I did was to start creating a paradigm or a framework for understanding this growth process, so people, when they hit that ceiling in recovery and realize that my 12 steps doesn't cover everything I need to grow as a human being, that they find the help they need. So that said, type 4 we call the creative alchemist, sensitive introverted type, also called them, the romantic, the artist, the drama queen, number of different words for it depending on their state of awareness. But here we have Amy Whitehouse, who died of alcoholism and drug addiction. And next to her is David Bowie, who had something like 50 years of recovery before he passed away. So then we've got Anthony Hopkins, who's also just celebrated his 50th year in recovery and doing amazing work. And then Prince, who died of addiction. And then Stevie Nicks, who came into recovery. I was reading her biography the other day and didn't realize that she was in the thick of substance abuse when she was going through all of the successful times in her music career. But she's another beautiful type 4. And then Philip Seymour Hoffman, who had recovery for 20 years and then relapsed and died of his addiction. So really, this strikes a lot of different creative, lovely, beautiful people. Pollock is a movie you could watch. It gives the life of a type 4 who, when he was sober, was an amazing artist, and when drinking, everything fell apart. So a little cartoon for the type 4. It's not easy being the psychedelic sheep of the family. 4s often feel like they're kind of the weird one in the family. Then we have type 4 leaving a room, and most people just go through the exit calmly, and there's a type 4 there going through dramatic expression as they leave the room to make sure that you notice that they've just left. And then this cartoon about a type 4 temperament, which is, here's the cat at the window, and he's saying, "Oh, I'm so lonely," and bemoaning his fate. "Why must I live this life alone in solitude?" And then someone reaches out to help him, and he says, "Don't touch me." And then he returns again to, will this loneliness ever end? And this is kind of a poking fun at one of the patterns of the type 4 when they get caught up in their suffering and their melancholy. And if you're a type 4, you may relate to that a little bit. And then I'm going to skip this slide. And then this last one, type 4 guard dog who's barking at the passerby, "Don't tell me you're okay. You're not okay. I can smell the hurt inside you. Don't walk away. Talk to me." Which again is poking fun at some of the orientations of the 4 to be a little bit habitually drawn to talking about their suffering more than others might want to partake in. So another one is often, the Dalai Lama says, we often add to our pain and suffering by being overly sensitive, overreacting to minor things, and sometimes taking things too personally. Now, the 4s aren't the only ones that do this, but the 4s have a tendency to do it a little bit more than other types. So let's just take a look at a definition here. Creative alchemist. sensitive, introspective type. And at their best, they have a natural capacity for expressing the depths of their being through art or through writing, dancing, poetic expression, wherever they put their attention. There's a tendency to be dramatic, to bring things to life through a kind of emotional charge, which can be really healthy and inspiring and blow you away. All you have to do is listen to Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac to be blown away by the intensity and drama she brings to her music. And then as they're less healthy, they become self-absorbed and temperamental. So there's a reason for that. You can say that 4s are born with a predisposition towards experiencing depth, identity, communion with beauty, and a sense of just feeling intimate towards all aspects of life. And of course, when a little baby is born, they're basically sitting in their potentiality. It's something that's going to be needed to be developed over time. But a healthy 4, when they're, conscious and they've healed their hearts and they've done their inner work, often can be quite a joyful, joyful, expressive, optimistic type that you would think, that doesn't seem like a 4, that seems more like a 7. But when a 4 is healthy, that when their tendency sometimes as they have suffered various insults as a little one, is to develop kind of a habit of melancholy or slipping into the sad impressions they've been taking in and getting over-identified with the sadness inside of them. And now, not all types do that. Type 7s just throw that stuff out the back door and say, we're going to have fun today, and if I'm going to feel sadness, it's going to have to capture me from behind and drag me to the ground. I'm not going there. But type 4s have a natural sort of orientation towards being with whatever suffering they've experienced. And I think it's ultimately because one of their karmic gifts is digesting and transforming deep suffering to assist other people. It's just something they inherited as a part of their type. So when I'm healthy as a type 4, I have a natural orientation towards seeing the beauty, even in the simplest, most ordinary things. I have a tendency of feeling a deep connection with those around me, with my environment, a sense of, just communing with the environment. You could say on a larger level, a sense of just feeling at one with whatever is in front of them and within them. And they also have a natural curiosity towards the mystery of life. Like, how does this work on a deep level? What is it that's brought all of this into manifestation? So, like some other types, very mystically oriented for those who have done inner work. And when I start to lose contact with these natural gifts, which I do as a little one, each of us comes in with a sort of natural predisposition, something that we've arrived with, and then based on our childhood, we either have more openness to it and developing it or not. And in all cases, we've got to develop what you could call a shell of personality to protect us. As little ones, we don't have the nervous system to process insults and hurts, etc. And so we start to develop a kind of barrier to our experience of life, which we call the shell of personality, and it's done in the flavor of my type. So for the type 4, as a result of developing this ego structure, which we must have, it's not a bad thing. As most traditions would say, our ego structure is actually fertilizer for creating a deeper, essential self. So they go together. They're not. The ego is not the enemy of my spiritual growth. It's a partner in it. So when I start to develop this ego structure as a little kid, my basic fear arises of having no identity or personal significance. And type 4s, inherently have this kind of struggle as little ones around, who am I? I can't quite feel my insides. And so what I do as a little 4 is maybe I start focusing, on some kind of unique expression, beauty, or something that somebody else isn't doing. But it starts from from two places. One is because I have a natural creative orientation. When I'm suffering with this sense of who am I, and well, am I just this generic stone on the road, is I start to find something to identify with that gives me a sense of identity. So the secondary fear, which I feel most intensely, is of being dull, ordinary, of being without depth or uniqueness. And so fours have a kind of inner critic that's always sort of noticing whether they're being dull and boring and ordinary, and sort of putting that on them as a suffering, like, God, you couldn't be more boring today. What are you going to do with your life if you keep up like this? And so with a type 4, I got to do something to break out of that mold of being boring. And so often 4s will go to great lengths to, express something that's unique to them, or even becoming an object of beauty, get tattooing themselves, doing things that say, here I am, and this is who I am. But ultimately, there's this sensitivity towards feeling like I'm not special at all. It's like the idea that that God looks down on the little 4 and sees nothing there and turns away. So there's this, in a sense, you could say type 4s many times have a kind of bereft heart around being seen, of being really mirrored as little ones. And all types need mirroring, but 4s really specifically need to be mirrored and reflected upon, because that sense of that I'm nobody at all can be very strong for them. So my desire is to find my true self, which is a healthy and important desire. But it's also working up against the idea of just being nobody whatsoever. So, what we say sometimes about the 4s is that they are not able to escape the knowing that there's something greater than just this ordinary life. And so they struggle with a sense of longing for something they can't put their fingers on. And my experience has been this longing has something to do with a connection with myself at a deeper and deeper level. And if I'm doing inner work, that longing is satisfied. But there's this kind of mysterious thing, a kind of emptiness that is so elusive. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to fill it with clothes, with activities, with books. And so it becomes ultimately a pointer towards the idea of, why am I here? Who am I, and why have I come to this planet? And when 4s begin to understand that and do that kind of searching, a lot of that suffering around longing starts to change. So my self-image is I'm special, I'm sensitive, I'm different, unique, intuitive, self-aware, alongside of I'm nobody special and nobody notices me. It's like it's a two-edged sword. And there's also can be sort of an interesting orientation around, God help me if I start to become as ordinary as the neighbors over there. They're just having an ordinary barbecue on a Sunday. And oh my God, the dad has a polyester pair of pants on, and what is that strange t-shirt? If I ever become that ordinary, you have permission to shoot me. Otherwise, I'll be off in my apartment doing suicidal poetry, because I'm going to be the real one, right? So again, these are extremes of expression, but they can go there. If you're type 4, you have some familiarity with extremism. So the thing, we talk about the mechanisms that set the type 4 into their protective mode are something called a fixation, which is the mental machinery of our three-centered being. We've got a head center, a heart center, a gut center. And when I'm caught in personality, type 4s realize they have this, when they're wounded, they have this capacity to go into fantasy to escape dealing with what is troubling them. Either they may go into fantasizing themselves as a great writer. If people just understood me, I would be this great writer, or I'd be this great pianist. And they drop into fantasy dreaming about it rather than taking action on it. Or they have this interesting peculiarity where if somebody hurts them, they start replaying it in their head and imagining it actually worse than it was, because they're creative people. They add ingredients to whatever that scene is that that hurt them, and so they get caught up in this fantasizing wheel of suffering that they just can't take themselves out of. So all of this fixation mental activity feeds the heart wound of the type 4, which, the heart wound is I lose contact with my ability to feel my own sense of lovableness. And it fills in as an emptiness, a hole in my heart that gets filled by envy. It's like envy feels like if I'm feeling envious, it's almost like I'm going to get back to what I lost. And envy can be experienced in a lot of different ways. It can be a sense that you got something that I didn't get, or you got the guidance I didn't get, or you had an opportunity I didn't have, and there's almost like a sense of a bereft child who missed their opportunity to become who they could fully be. And so there's always this agony of comparing myself to others. And there's a lot of different ways this can occur, but the point being is that fantasizing and envy work off each other. They're a harmony. There's not one doesn't work independently of the other or cause the suffering of the other, but they fuse together. My head center and my heart center create this dance that has me imagining that the neighbor has a better life, or all the wealthy people have a better life, or if I'd just been given the right parenting, I also would be a movie star. And just working with the sense of envy and fantasizing together is what creates a kind of perfect storm internally that sets him up for deep unhappiness. So we say the life script of the 4 is in search of identity and the overall quality that they bring as subjectivity, their personal experience. So let's just take a look at how this can unfold. So I have the word the individualist, could be the creative alchemist, could be the artist. When I lose contact with essence, which is my natural innate well-being, that I'm loved and cared for, and that sense of security that comes from it, what shows up is the heart wound is envy. And underneath the heart wound is the actual experience of the tortured heart. Forrest will say, when I'm caught up in envy, it feels like somebody just rammed a sword into my heart and turned it. There's this sense of just angst and agony. And it centers around something around I didn't get what I needed. And so when we talk about a wake-up call, each type has a wake-up call, which if I begin to notice it, lets me know that my personality dynamics that set me up for my habitual unhappiness are now operating. And I have an opportunity to stop in my tracks and do something that allows me not to go into the trance. So we say fantasizing is using my imagination to intensify my emotion and to feel my uniqueness. If I'm in a bereft place and feeling like I'm nobody special, then nobody like the 4 can create a kind of fantasy self that embodies everything I wish I had that I think I don't have, such that the gifts that I really do have, I override those in a sense, in putting my attention into what I don't have and what I wish I had. And so there's this whole mechanism, if I become skillful at becoming mindful and noticing fantasy starting to play through me in an unhealthy way, I can do meditation practice, I can connect with a counselor, I can connect with a coach or a good friend, but there's a way that I have to wake myself up so I don't just drop into the deluge of this swampy sadness that's always waiting for me. So fantasizing is different than using my imagination in a creative way. So, to be a writer or a poet or an artist of any kind, I've got to use fantasy to, in a sense, inspire ideas. The healthy use of it is I actually put those ideas into play and start doing the writing, the practical writing I need to do, or do the editing on the book. When I'm a type 4, I imagine myself doing that and feel like I'm actually completing the book. I remember Don Riso saying one time, he said, for about 10 years, I imagined myself as a famous pianist, and I got this beautiful piano. And my teacher said to me one day, "Why do you have that piano?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be going to be a concert pianist. And he said, well, do you play? He said, no, not yet, not yet. But he had been fantasizing playing for like 10 years. So that's the unhealthy aspect of the fantasizing. So the tortured longing heart, and as I develop more capacity to be real, to be in the moment, develop presence, I start to develop an acceptance of objective reality, which means if I have a desire to write, that means I got to put the hours in. If I have a desire to be a counselor, I've got to go to school. I've got to do what everybody else does to get there. And I've got to notice if I'm getting caught up in some idea that I should be able to get there quicker than other people with less work. So at the core of me as a type 4, when I'm healthy, is I develop a compassionate, deep heart that can feel both the positive, the joy of a loving heart and also the depth of suffering that I'm going to go through as a human being. So we say the path of transformation is towards forgiveness and discovering my innate goodness and value. So we have 9 levels of development for each type. So when I'm healthy as a type 4, I'm living up in levels 1, 2, and 3 in my ability to be present, to have access to my gifts, to feel compassion for myself and others is on board. So levels 1, 2, and 3 are conscious levels of being. 4, 5, and 6 is when my defensive patterns are on board because I haven't done the inner work to heal my heart, or I'm still struggling with suffering that I acquired through life. So we call levels 4, 5, and 6 the average levels, 1, 2, and 3 the healthy levels, and then 7, 8, and 9 have to do with severe mental, emotional suffering, disordering, and we call these the unhealthy levels. Now, so when I'm healthy as a type 4, one thing that shows up across the board is the capacity for 4s to be very self-aware, to not edit themselves out, to be able to be with both the light and darkness in themselves. And they tend to live there, and they tend to like talking about that. That's where, you go to a gathering or something, and type 4s are looking for that one that wants to talk about the depths, the agony and the ecstasy, the Rumi poem, that everything is welcome here. So when I'm healthy as a 4, I'm naturally introspective, self-aware, but also I'm in contact with something called equanimity. I have a quality of inner calmness, depth, peace that I've acquired through my inner work. So there's a way I can be both deeply joyful, funny, expressive, at the same time versatile emotionally. As I go down the levels, I tend to become less versatile and more caught up in the and hooked on negative emotion. So level 3, which again is a healthy level, I appreciate it if you do the same with them. And when I'm healthy, I have balance. I don't need to do that all the time. I'm just as curious about you as I am about sharing my own story. But there's something about depth stories and sharing levels. My tendency is to have a lot of balance and ability to be flexible around feelings, around, being able to tolerate a wide variety of people, and also just a real generosity of spirit. We say that type 4s are one of the types that love to help people transform. We call them the creative alchemist. A lot of therapists are type 4s. A lot of people, in the therapeutic traditions are type 4s. So as I'm less healthy, meaning I've got undigested suffering, I'm not in contact with unconditional loving kindness for myself, I tend to start to get over-identified with my reactivity, my hurt feelings. And I tend to start getting more caught up in fantasizing about what I wish I was, or what you have, or, envy starts to pop up online at level 4. And there's a way that, I can even start to become attention-seeking through being overly expressive with my emotions. But I think what happens at level 4, in my experience, is that because I haven't developed the capacity for healing in myself, my emotions just get bigger inside myself until I actually am able to acknowledge them. And this doesn't usually cheer people up. at all around me. They're like, oh my God, could you turn the volume down here? And then the 4 says, no, actually, I need to turn it up because you're not getting me. So I can self-indulge in feelings of disappointment, envy, loss, grief, self-pity, and turbulent emotional reactions. And there's a way when, the 4 drops below levels 3. At levels 1, 2, and 3, I have a sense of who I am. I can feel my own uniqueness, and I appreciate the uniqueness in everybody around me. I'm not the only unique one in the house. Anybody here has a unique vibration, and I love to learn about it. At level 4, I start to feel like I can't feel my uniqueness, and so one way that I get in contact with myself is by getting over-identified with my emotions of the moment. That starts to feel like, that's me. I'm the sadness right now. Oh, now I'm the anger. Just had a mood swing. Now I'm that mood. And I start to get really confused, but it's like I don't have an inner anchor that allows me to settle and feel like this is who I am. This is who Michael is. So dramatizing, fantasizing starts to kick in. And then as I become, in a sense, more caught up in my woundedness, 4s can become very hypersensitive. It can feel like people are doing things as a referendum on me, and they, that little glance I got from them means something, and I go into fantasy and start thinking about what they're thinking about me and how they think I'm horrible, and then I get in a conversation about how I hate them too, may they rot in hell, and there's this whole spinning thing that occurs. So I start to get more self-absorbed around my inner emotional states because I'm suffering. Level 5 on down, regardless of the type, I'm suffering, I don't know the way out, and it seems like the real problem isn't me, that it's actually you. If you would wise up, life would be better, especially mine. So all the types do that. We start, feeling like victims. And at level 6, the characteristic for the type 4 is to feel exempt. It's like, what is the flip side of feeling ashamed and that you're nothing? Oh, the other side is exemption. I'm above all of you. I don't know why I don't get a free pass. There's been a mistake here on planet Earth, but I'm awesome, and I shouldn't have to do the ordinary labors the rest of you proletarians have to do. I've got something special. So I start to develop a kind of arrogance around it, which is only a cover for the fact that I don't feel like I'm worth much. And all the types, as they go down the level, start to develop these unbecoming patterns as a compensation for feeling really sad or hurt or unlovable. And so nobody at level 5 on down is conscious that I'm caught up in my patterns. People around them can notice and go, oh my God, you are so self-pitying today. You're wilting the branches off the tree. Do you notice that? And if I'm caught in self-pity, I do not notice that. I just think that you're a fool, right? So there's a natural blindness for all the types as they go down the levels. And the doorway in for all of this is acquiring a certain kind of compassion for bearing with and mirroring and being able to abide with people when they're down the levels. And this is, sometimes the work of certainly of a therapist or, a good friend or a partner, is how do I, learn to abide with my type 4 when they're triggered and down in the, I'd say down in the well of their own particular suffering. So level 7, 8, 9, everything gets darker, right? And it's just, everything's magnified in terms of self-pity. And, of all the types, the type 4 is probably one of the best at hating themselves when they're really going down the levels. It's almost like if I hate myself enough, I'll wake myself up into a better reality. But the compelling habit of self-hate gets really strong, and the type 4 starts comparing themselves against whatever their fantasy self was of if I had had the right childhood, I'd be this amazing actress or writer or poet or Bob Dylan. Whoever that is my archetype. And I just get more and more hooked on the fantasy of what I could have been. So down the levels I go. And the good news is, for all of us, when people come into recovery, they're usually sitting down at level 6. Based, whatever the type is, self-pity, exemption, elitism, if you think about your early days of recovery, all of these for me were protection from feeling like I'd failed terribly. So it started with, feeling like I got the bad deal and you didn't, blah, blah, blah. But as I did inner work, my center of gravity started to move up the levels so that I started to feel more well-being. As I, saw more of my self-absorption, I was able to detach from it. As I reduced the habit or didn't take the bait of fantasizing about this or that and started living in the real world, I felt better and better until eventually I started to experience these higher levels. So it's a journey that all of us can take. Okay, so core identification of the four identifies powerfully with feelings of otherness, of being flawed, and with their emotional reactions. It's like whatever emotion gets triggered in me, it feels like that's me. They resist recognizing authentic positive qualities in themselves and also noticing how much alike they are with other people, right? So this is where, this can be a tricky one in the recovery world, but there's sort of an anti-uniqueness clause that people sort of espouse in recovery around, you're nothing unique. You're just another bozo on the bus. That's the expression they use here in South Portland, Maine. But the truth is, I am just like everyone else, but I'm also a unique flavor of that. So there's both of that. There's both uniqueness, and there's both the sense of my common humanness that I have, with every human being I'm with. There's a commonality. So the doorway home oftentimes is forgiveness. And usually that starts with forgiving myself. Maybe I'm not the only one who feels this way. Maybe there's a lot of people just like me who feel like the outsider or feel like the flawed one or the defective one. And in fact, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Yes, I may have patterns that tend to kick my butt from time to time, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It just means I'm human. So there's a way for the type 4s, they become more compassionate towards themselves around their flaws, because they tend to have a really sharp eye on what's wrong with them and what's imperfect, similar to the type 1, as they develop more compassion for their humanness and develop more trust in the process of their own journey. This feeling that I'm okay, just like I am, becomes stronger and stronger. And then they become more fun to be around at that point. At least that's what I've been told. So thoughts or any questions popping up? Or
All right, I think that's it. Thank you, Michael, so much for this, and everybody.